Okay, do we have?
We
quorum?
need one more for quorum.
Okay, so if you're online, just please hold with us while we try to establish quorum. I know we have 3, so we must have an online viewer. Okay. Yep, so we're just trying to establish quorum. Thank you.
Remember who online?
No, thank you.
So now we are unmuted. Now people can hear us.
We were unmuted
We-
and then we went back to mute.
Great, thank you.
Is that
For quorum.
okay?
I think he
while
just
we're
wanted to
waiting?
make sure his
Sure.
announcement
Okay.
was heard, that's all. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, at this time, we think we've got quorum, so everyone welcome. It is 9:04 a.m. and Adrian, if we can go ahead and have roll call, please.
Thank you, yes. Dublin. Oakland. Alameda County.
Present.
Pleasanton.
Present.
Albany.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Okay, so with that, we'll move to item 2, which is the selection of the executive committee chair. This is an action item brought before us. I don't think there's a staff presentation on that. So I will presume or assume that I can nominate Aaron Tiedemann as our chair of the executive committee.
Second.
We have a second from Alameda. All in, or can we do a roll call vote, please?
Yes, thank you. Dublin, Oakland, Alameda County,
Aye.
Pleasanton,
Aye.
Albany.
Aye.
Motion's firm.
Okay, and with that, we'll do exactly like we did at the board meeting for the meeting.
Don't throw the gavel.
So I didn't throw the gavel, I slightly pushed it over and welcome and congratulations.
Thank you very much. With that, we will move to public comment. Are there any members of the public online?
Yes, we have one member of the public with hand raised and 3 minutes.
Yep.
Okay. Local Clean Energy Alliance, you recognize for 3 minutes.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. Jessica Tovares, Bay Clean Power Alliance. I did resubmit a letter that we shared back in January, and it is in regards to creating a resilience hub fund asking for $15 million towards Resilience Hub. Just recognizing that there are community organizations throughout Alameda County and San Joaquin County who could use the resources towards building resilience, and just a huge emphasis on building resilience before disaster as opposed to responding once crisis hits. When things are a lot more harder, I think we can create a program that actually addresses the needs to building resilience in every low-income community, environmental justice community that is in the AVA community territory. I think this is innovative approach, and just recognizing that, you know, we're excited to see that the agency is fiscally healthy, and I think that there could be a huge investment in making sure that our communities that we represent are equally as healthy, and set a precedent for other community choice programs to really respond to the needs of community organizations, community groups within their territory. I'll stop there, but just to highlight, the letter does again was submitted originally in January, and it has, I believe, about 26 organizations that have signed on so far. Thank you very much. Clean power to the people.
Great, thank you. There are no further hands raised for public comment.
Great, thank you for your comment, and hopefully you'll stick around for the Resilience Hub discussion later on our agenda. With that, we'll move to the approval of minutes from our February 7th meeting.
I'll move approval.
Second?
Motion and a second. Do we have any public comment on this item?
There are no hands raised at this time. I'd just like to recognize that Member Hugh has arrived.
Fantastic. Welcome, Member Hugh. We have a motion and a second. With that, can we move to a roll call vote on approval of the minutes?
Great, thank you very much. Dublin. Dublin. Come back, Dublin. Oakland. Alameda County.
Aye.
Pleasanton.
Aye.
Albany.
Aye.
Dublin.
Here.
Thank you. We are voting on the minutes.
Chair, we're voting on the minutes. Do you vote aye?
Yes, yes, aye.
Great,
Thank you.
Minutes are approved.
Thank you. With that, we will move to item 5, which is our recommendation for timing for customer enrollment for Stockton and Lathrop. And this is going to be Annie.
Yep. Good morning. Morning, Member Hugh. So this is a recommendation on the timing of enrollment for the customers in Stockton and Lathrop. They both have approval from the PUC to join as early as January 2025. And so we wanted to look at some of the key factors to consider when deciding when to enroll those customers. So we looked at a couple different scenarios. First, from a financial impact, since that seemed to be a leading consideration. So all customers in January, all customers in April, or a split with residential in January and then commercial in April. Based on that, we found that an all January enrollment had a large fiscal impact to the negative. And so we ruled that out and then considered an April or a split. And then we further considered sort of impact to the customer, operational complexity, as well as sort of external factors such as there will be a presidential election in November, which is when we would start our notification. So there could be a little bit of like mailbox fatigue. So in the end, our recommendation is to enroll all customers in April, both commercial and residential. And in terms of our NEM customers, just to call them out as sort of a special case, we would do them on a staggered basis. We're still waiting for that data. We don't have all the data yet to make a determination about should that be every other month, every quarter, but it would be on a staggered basis based on what's called their true update. That's it.
Any questions from board members?
How many new customers are we talking about, commercial and residential?
It's about 110,000 or so total.
Any other questions?
No, sorry.
If I may.
Go for it.
Through the chair. So, the question I had is, we know Stockton was obviously initially planned earlier and then, just due to process and procedure, we're at this point, right?
Correct.
So Lathrop in its timing seems much more accelerated compared to Stockton. Do you mind just kind of, helping us remember that or understand that timing of it?
Sure. So we did, and I might turn to Alex, who was really instrumental in submitting the implementation plan amendment to the PUC. So when we did submit that, which would have been for a January 2024 start for Stockton, we followed the appropriate timeline, submitted that to the PUC. They made a determination that for certain compliance reasons that they wanted additional information before approving our start date for Stockton. So ultimately, that was pushed back to January 2025. Within the 2023 timeframe, Lathrop was added, and they followed the standard timeline from the PUC and were approved for the same January 2025. So that is why Stockton was more delayed, and Lathrop is in fact just on the standard timeline, and Stockton was delayed.
Okay, and then if I may, so, the delay or the questions that the CPUC had related to Stockton, we've resolved those, and we do not anticipate a delay for either community to come online at this time, right?
Correct.
Because that's what I just want to make sure that we don't go out and promise or start talking about a date and then something unexpected delays it, at least for Stockton, an additional time, right?
It would be outside of the standard process. We've received the approval letter from the
Okay.
PUC for earliest start January 2025 for both cities.
Okay. Okay, that concludes my questions. Thank you, Chair.
One question, I think I can guess the answer, but the starting in January would have a negative impact. Is that just because more power usage in those months during the winter or
You wanna
anything
speak to that,
specific?
Alex?
Yeah, just significantly higher prices in the winter months. And so just from a financial perspective, typically you tend to lose money in some of the winter months, and then you start to make money and cover your costs in the spring and into the summer months. So enrolling in that period tends to just have higher costs associated always.
Great, yeah, thank you. Unless there are any other questions, we will move public comment. Is there any public comment on this item?
There are no hands raised at this time.
Bring it back.
Oh, there is one hand raised.
Good, we checked.
Thank you. Local Clean Energy Alliance. Hold on one second. You're recognized for 3 minutes.
Hello, Jessica again. I just wanted to make a quick comment. I think that Stockton community, Lathrop community have everything to gain in being part of the AVA Community Energy Community Choice Agency program. And just to kind of recognize that, I think the sooner we can start making that switch, because just recognizing that Stockton has been delayed by a whole year. And it's been kind of a long road in terms of attempts to get a community choice program at the city level, and then, trying to join this agency, which I'm excited about. And so I just want to encourage, the sooner the better. And hopefully we don't encounter any more delays by the CPUC. Thank you.
Thank you. There are no further hands raised.
Great. I'll bring it back for board discussion. If any.
I support staff's recommendation. No, it's just informational item, but I support the rationale and appreciate the reminder of the historical context, how we got here.
I would agree as well, and I also think the mail fatigue is a real thing, at least what I see from the primary. So I think there's an element to that, and if you keep Ava's financial impacts in mind, then I think April makes sense based on staff's recommending. So,
Member who?
So I enjoy the discussion we had, and I think we did research into like two different enroll times. That makes sense to me.
Great. Thank you. I'll echo what everyone else said. This makes a lot of sense. And I think the thought process on avoiding a new change during the holiday and the election and when everything's changing is probably a good one to make sure people know who we are and don't blame us for high rates, because that's a tricky thing to manage, so I appreciate the effort.
Thank you.
Great. With that, I assume we don't need a motion on this, which is
No.
great. With that, we will move to item 6, which is our default rate product change policy amendments, which I believe we're going to Alex.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. So what we have here for you this morning are proposed amendments to the policy on member requests to change the default rate product within their jurisdiction. Just for some quick background, this was a policy that's been in place since 2021. It's been implemented multiple times. And this policy was developed in response to requests from our member jurisdictions to, generally speaking, to opt up all accounts by default citywide within their jurisdictions for all but the customers that are on discount programs like Care, FARA, Medical Baseline. And so in having implemented this multiple times, what we found is that there are opportunities for a more efficient process, both in the decision-making and the implementation. And so if I could just direct folks' attention to what's page 4 of the staff report, there you'll see that as originally written in the current policy is that we have 2 approval dates, and that will be board approval by our board. So there are 2 opportunities by which the board can consider and approve requests from our member jurisdictions, and then correspondingly 2 opportunities for implementing it that relate to those requests. Both of those provide a 6-month runway from the time of the approval to when the implementation goes into effect. That runway was developed in consultation with our power resources team to give them time to procure the power to implement these requests. The proposed amendments here are really to reduce that to one time a year. What we found is that both in terms of procurement, but also in terms of the outreach and the notifications that are required for these types of enrollments, kind of similar to the previous considerations that we were just discussing with Annie's item, that it's more efficient to have once a year that we can plan around. And so we're proposing that a date of May 31st. So basically giving our member jurisdictions the first half of the year, several months to go through their processes, and then for our board to consider it. And what we're asking for feedback on specifically is the implementation. And again, this is very similar to the item we just discussed. The question would be here to implement in January or to implement in March. And I do want to point out there is a typo. We have January 30th proposed here. It would be the 31st. So again, to clarify, what we're primarily seeking feedback on is the date of implementation. And we can go over them in detail if folks want, but there is a table here that kind of weighs the costs and benefits of those separate implementation options.
Great, thank you. Sure. Any questions from board members?
So just so I'm clear, this is for cities that want to opt up to Renewable 100?
That's how it's been implemented. The policy is ecumenical when it comes to what the request would be. But yeah, generally speaking, what it has been and what we anticipate are cities that are considering opting up to renewable.
Okay. Can you remind me how many cities are already set up with Renewable 100 as their default?
Yeah, about half the cities
Half.
now.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so the same rationale applies to what we heard previously with respect to the difference between January or March for implementation. I'm in support of the March request then, just to try to be as consistent as we possibly can.
If I may through the chair, so not April.
No, March.
Why?
Why?
You're asking why not April 1 as opposed to March 31st, or like April 30? versus March?
Yeah, thank you for the clarification. Let me rephrase, right? So if we're starting to standardize our processes a bit, both for rolling customers in or new jurisdictions and also opting up, I do think, and maybe I'll apologize to go a bit of comment, but as budgets become more constrained, I know there's been a conversation in Pleasanton about opting down as a way to save money, although it would cause our climate action plan to be significantly impacted, right? So, but as for Ava, right, standardization, Q1, I guess I'll ask, are you thinking further to that and what you would want to do so that jurisdictions over time, as we add or kind of move to, as we as an entity move to governmental process, right? Yeah, so why March? Why not April? Why not start thinking to that line?
Yeah, well, so for the customer experience, it would feel like April, because that's when they would first
April
see the
1.
charges on their bill. So the implementation, we're talking about the cutover date but by each account's meter read date. So that's what would occur by the end of March. So for the customer experience, it would feel like April. But I could imagine that to be consistent with initial enrollments, it could be April, then those charges would appear in May.
And I would just clarify, I don't think that was very intentional for us to choose March 31st in this policy and April 1 of the other policy, if that's your question. That could easily be aligned as a day difference for pure standardization. But if you're asking it could be April 30th, it could be. I think it's the same rationale in both cases, which is if you do it on January 30th, you're really hitting high seasonal prices, and that's when you've opted people up to a more expensive rate. And so doing it March 31st or April 1 is, I think we would be different on that. And am I correct?
Just a
or-
quick clarification, because of the way customers are billed, we actually roll customers on every single day, every weekday throughout a month. So this was written so that they enroll through March, and by the end of March, everybody's on, correct?
Mhm.
And then what I proposed was we start April 1 and enroll through the month of April.
Yeah,
So there is an inconsistency there.
I'm not.
But to Howard's point, that is sort of a period of lower rates in general. I think April 1 starts the spring rates.
Yep.
I don't know if I am not trying to say we align. I'm trying to just ask about the process staff went through to evaluate the timing, right? I also noticed it says implement by, so I presume that's your last date, right? So, if we wanted to implement in fall because we got it done in 6 months from when the request was made, May 31st, right? I get that concept, but as I think about standardization and what, as an entity of AVA, we want to do, I'll maybe leave it as a comment that I think we should try to encourage that standardization on our deadlines for our member agencies. So I can go with this. I don't see April better. I'm not trying to say I weigh it better either, right? But I think standardization and kind of a cadence like I was talking about earlier, I think that matters for our member jurisdictions. Because I do think that as they complete their budgets, for a June 1 or July 1 year, they have to make these choices in that as well, right? And so, maybe the dates start to align to fiscal years of our members, right? Think about that. So.
Yeah, I don't see any reason why those couldn't be consistent.
Yeah, or maybe we look at it, in the next rendition further on, once we do this, right, if there's a different time. As to 1 point versus 2, I don't know if we've seen, I don't have a history long enough to know if it's, sorry, I should ask questions, have we had a major challenge that one couldn't do it, one annual versus semi-annual options for our members? I wouldn't think it's a big issue. Top, up or down. I do see the benefits of singular though, so that we can procure, more easier for AVA to procure at better rates, so we know our customer base.
I think we would say there's no major event that has forced us to say we have to change this. I think this is more of a general, let's try to be efficient and standardize to one date, and so there's clarity with all the member jurisdictions on what the timing of the process is. So if there was a strong feeling from the board to say, we really want to maintain two, I think we would definitely revisit that, am I right?
Some of the thinking behind this is that the remaining cities, we have two of our largest. So, well, and Stockton as well. But if Fremont or Oakland were to decide they wanted to opt up, given what we're already serving with Renewable 100, you start to get towards that scarcity, place where the pricing is very different. And so we want just a little bit more ramp and ability to plan, because we're getting closer to that point where we're gonna see prices change, given the load that we have to serve with our 100.
That makes a lot of, that is a strong factor that I think we should
Yeah.
consider. And I'll just say, so when sorry, comments, I guess, but cities' fiscal budgets, when they're deciding that budget process, similar to us, and when they would evaluate opting up if they could afford it, hopefully that's the way they're going, right? For a July 1 budget, usually adopted mid-June or earlier. Coupled with when Ava could implement and not bombard customers with mailers and whatnot, but at the same time procure energy in an efficient, effective manner, right? So I think as we look at it in future, since this is informational, if you are gonna massage it, I think those two factors need to be discussed or thought with it.
And can I just clarify, not to say that's the direction, but if we were to take that into account, is that a suggestion to say perhaps having Ava board approval sometime in the July or September timeframe would allow for that to happen with the cities, and then we could basically just push these timeframes out a couple months on both ends?
Well, I think if we're here to serve the customer and the city is the member jurisdiction, right? I personally would believe cities would evaluate. Okay, Pleasanton Pleasanton looks at it as a financial choice as well, right? Not only is it, and the carbon-free element is an added cherry on top, right? So when we're doing our budget and we're choosing if we're gonna allocate an additional certain amount of money as a city for our municipal choice, as well as our default for our customer choice, right? We're already in at the R100. I know we factored in price, right? I know we looked at that. And so if you wanted to make a change, typically you're looking at price at your budget, right, as a city. So Pleasanton started its budget conversation in its next meeting in March. I don't know when other jurisdictions do per se. March, April, May, usually we know the direction so that mid-June, or, we're approving at the last May meeting or early June meeting. And if Ava then approved in July or so, and implemented thereafter, right? That might seem to help be a partner with our member agencies. I say it like that. If that, based on going back and looking at when you have to notice customers and implement and all that is difficult, then, I don't want to carry that water. I'm just trying to mention other elements that I would factor into the choice.
Understood. And are all the member cities on the same budget fiscal year timeframe? They are.
Some do 2-year budgets though.
Okay.
That would be the only difference, but they're required to adopt by June 30th, but I'm not aware of any cities waiting that long. Don't ask me how long the count is.
Yeah. Usually we're done by May, at least, and then it's more of a formality in June for
It
July
was by
1.
like June 10th.
But if a city opted up or down, we want to facilitate, right? That's kind of the other goal. We want to be able to make the change if they could. So, sorry.
All good.
If I could make one comment
Please.
there, the one consideration I would throw out there that we had taken into account, that's really helpful feedback from you, is the value of May 31st for us is so for Ava, we can set our budget going into June.
And maybe that's why it
So
is.
That would be, that is why we
Yeah.
identified May as our key day, if I recall correctly, right? It was so that we could have that finalized, so that the final budget passed in June by the board, we could say, we know these major jurisdictions have made their rate choices, and so we have pretty good clarity on what the budget looks like as a result of that.
Yeah, so that's great. Actually, now that we're talking through it as a conversation, right? May 31st for making your selection.
Right.
Right? So then now the question is, okay, implementation. Well, then maybe the March 31st of the subsequent year is right in line with that.
Yeah.
And we don't worry about when Lathrop and Stockton are coming online. That's a separate issue.
Yeah, I would also note that this policy is for default for community-wide
Yeah.
changes. If your municipality wish to change which product you're being served with, that can happen at any time.
Yeah.
I mean, we need a little bit of runway, but not this length.
Yeah,
It's
because they're just one customer versus an entire several, 100,000
Right.
accounts or whatever.
So if Pleasanton said, based on our budget, we want our municipal accounts on Bright Choice, that's something we can implement within, say, 6 weeks. And
So-
it doesn't have to follow this.
Similar to any particular customer, unique
Yes.
customer can opt out of EBC or AVA at any time.
Yeah, there's nothing in the policy that changes that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or opt out. Or opt out.
Yeah.
Okay.
Other questions?
I do.
Go for it.
Are we having conversations with municipalities that are considering opting up? Are those ongoing conversations?
Yes.
Okay. I'm looking at, there's a long list. I thought we had more, so. Let's see.
They're about, they're half the jurisdictions have not changed their default. But there are those that are still considering it.
And as you had mentioned, some of the largest of our cities
Yep.
are on that list of possibly considering.
Yes.
Fremont has it in their climate action plan,
Right.
so there are use case at the moment.
Right. That makes sense. Good to know. One question I have, I don't need super exact info, but how much of the runway have we been using for the previous up switches of when other cities, like, have we been going up to the wire or we've been doing it, we have the time, but we haven't been using it fully?
Are you asking for procurement or for enrollment?
For enrollment, I guess, are we going up to we will do enrollment by this day, usually for the cities that opt in?
We've been using the full 6 months.
Okay. Good to know. Any further questions? Any from online?
No.
Seeing none. We will go to public comment. Are there any members of the public wishing to speak?
There are no hands raised at this time.
Seeing none, I'll bring it back for board discussion.
I'll just maybe start by just saying, as we talk through it, and I apologize because as I talk through it, I think I talked myself right back to what staff's recommendation is, but
That shows they did it right.
yeah, but I think that's the comment of, if I can give informational feedback, right? Talking about how we can partner with the member cities to
Yeah.
do that, and I think coupling with our needs to be able to do our budget. So May 31st, I think actually now as I process what we talked through, I think that actually works well. The implementation timeline, or is it March 31st or not? I just think we need standardization on that, but I don't have any problem with that March, Q1, end of Q1 kind of on a calendar quarter timeframe, Q3 for a fiscal. So yeah, I think this sits pretty well with where I'm at or where you guys have thought through it.
Okay, can I make one clarification? We'll point out one rationale for the January 30th date. We just wanted to make sure if cities had climate action plans that were pushing to say, we want the full year to be opted up for the purpose of there being sort of like a full year of being renewable 100, that we took that into account and understood if the cities felt that was an important factor, then we could, sort of accelerate a little bit of timing here. Though from a customer experience perspective, I think we would say March 31st would be the better timing, but we didn't know if that was an important factor for cities to consider or the county to consider.
I'd say for Pleasanton, it was both, right? And this is the constant challenge with any element, right? Are you choosing the green element or the green dollars or the green planet, right? I guess is how I'll say it. So I would let cities balance that, but I don't think this precludes them. If they truly wanted Jan 1, it is potentially possible if we moved quickly, but we'd obviously be having only 9 months to do it. So, or not even 9 months, excuse me, May 31st to the end of the year. Because it doesn't preclude us from doing it for a Jan 1.
Well, I think we are seeking feedback. Are we choosing one of the dates, or we actually, the policy itself will allow for both dates?
No, we're seeking one of those two.
Right,
to
so-
clarify.
Yeah, but they opt to tell us March 31st, but when we actually do it is the implementation date, right? And it's you're putting an outer bound on it. You're not putting an earlier.
I think what we're suggesting is the implementation we're
By
asking for
January 31st
feedback is
or
from the board to choose
by-
one of those dates. And if we were to choose the March 31st date, we would probably intentionally enroll in the month of March.
Yeah.
And so it would sort of eliminate the Jan 1 start potentially.
So it's not by meaning, you won't even start it, even if you were able to.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we're suggesting is it'd be March 1 through March 31st, because we would do the enrollments over the course of a month.
Yeah, that's.
And yeah, so I just want to be clear, we wouldn't be intentionally saying we're gonna start Jan 1. Of course, unless the board says that's actually a really critical factor we want to take into account, of course, we can, that's the feedback we want to seek. But if we were to choose March 31st, the plan would be March 1 through March 31st, that's the enrollment period.
So I misunderstood it because I thought by March 31st meant you could pick a date. You could pick December 31st so that you're done by Jan 1, right? Because there's no start date of the buy, right?
Yeah. That was a nod to the in the weeds actual implementation that customers roll in throughout the month. Should have been more explicit.
Yeah, we can clarify here that they would be on the March meter
Start,
date,
start, yeah.
Yeah.
March first through.
Yeah,
March
that's
31st.
the key.
Yeah.
That's
Um,
our feedback.
Clarity as a starting
Always
point.
I don't know if it's a significant factor to do Jan 1. I think this March 31st for a lot of the other reasons related to the power procurement, financial stability of AVA. I think that makes a lot of sense, for the
Yeah.
enrollment. So,
Yeah. I'd say the difference in months that you're covering on Renewable 100 is more in the weeds than most city councils will get. The important thing is just making the switch and having the item, not exactly when it happens. So I'm very comfortable with the March date. Other comments, discussion, thoughts? Great. Do you guys have everything you need from us? Thank you. Perfect.
we're on a roll, man. This one is.
I keep it efficient. With that, we will move to item 7, which is our resilience hubs and solar plus storage incentive update. And I believe that is JP.
Correct. Hi, Jake Ross, Vice President of Local Development. So we'll be talking through some of the work that we've been doing to support community resilience hubs. So if we go to the next slide. In response to the kind of community need, as well as some of the learnings that we've had from developing our own resilience hub with many of your cities through our critical municipal facilities program, we put together kind of a 3-pronged strategy for developing out and supporting the development of community resilience hubs across the territory. Those 3 elements are shown here. So one is we do have our community investment grant budget. We've been issuing some community investment grants. And one of those we would like to put together, we're currently in drafting stage on it now, would be a $300,000 community investment grant to partner with a local community-based organization to help kind of define and document resilience hubs, use cases, best practices, as well as kind of the community engagement and demand generation element that will be needed to develop these community resilience hubs. They're often in an ideation stage, or part of the community may not necessarily know what to do to build a resilience hub. And so as we want to build these, we see this as a multi-year effort, and working with communities to kind of identify those locations and bring them forward as potential sites for resilience hubs would be kind of an ongoing responsibility of the CBO that we'd like to bring on board. So that's one element of this. A second is a technical assistance track, which we have used through the development of our own resilience hub with your cities. Again, we've had 2 different independent engineers that we've been working with that have helped us think through kind of initial design constraints. They've actually done site walks for us, so looked at sites, identified what are the best placement locations for the solar and the storage, maybe what are some constraints of the associated sites. And then once somebody wants to develop a resilience hub and they go out to the solar industry to get bids, it's very helpful to have an independent third party who understands the market to review those bids. What's the right equipment? What's the right process for connecting that system? And lastly, in the technical assistance track would be some grant writing assistance. Lots of dollars out in this federal and state space right now for supporting resilience hubs, and often a community-based organization or site doesn't necessarily have the wherewithal to go get those funds. And so we've used our independent engineers to help us with grants, one of which was, we applied for a $35 million, federal grant to accelerate our critical municipal facilities program. We didn't get it, but that was something because we had existing contract with external support, we were able to kind of turn that on pretty quickly to go after those funds. So there's a technical assistance track. We have developed draft requests for proposals for both of these activities, and plan to issue them this month so that we can get this kicked off at the end of this fiscal year next. And then the third track is an incentive program. So as the board has directed, we have the 2023 budget surplus that we've been directed to allocate towards kind of resilient solar and storage programs. And so we're working through that now of how we allocate that, what is now $40 million associated with that budget surplus, recognizing that, that will change as we kind of get the final accounting for the year, but that funding would be allocated towards incentives for solar paired batteries. And those batteries will need to be interconnected to a distributed energy resource management system that we're in the process of procuring, so that we can see that those batteries are indeed operating, connected to the system, and actually give us some ability to control those batteries if we need to. And there would be incentives for kind of residential, non-residential, and we would have a higher set of incentives for low income or resilience hubs, recognizing that for, say, care customers, they're going to have a harder time paying for a solar and storage system. So we've increased the incentive levels for those critical components of the community. So that's kind of the framing of how we plan to go after this challenge and this opportunity. If we go to the next slide, talk through a little bit of some of the work that we've been doing. So we have been engaging with the community on getting feedback. So we presented to both the Community Advisory Committee last month, as well as city sustainability staff, our Muni Pals, which is a monthly meeting to get that feedback. We've also now issued a survey out to a bunch of community organizations, as well as sustainability staff, to just kind of document what are the use cases and needs that our community has identified. And we'll be incorporating that feedback after another CAC meeting at the March meeting on compiling that information, having another discussion with the CAC. And then we've also been working with the solar industry, so the California Solar and Storage Association, individual installers, kind of getting feedback on how we're thinking about rolling this program out to understand the customer impacts and the sales channel impacts. If you're going to roll out an incentive program, your key channel are the people who are selling those solar and storage systems. They have to understand what the incentives are, what the program is, so that they can effectively communicate that to a buyer. So, and that buyer then understands, okay, what are the rules of engagement for getting this incentive funding. And we want to make sure that these incentives not only are kind of used at the point of sale, but that are really, extended over a longer term to make sure these batteries continue to operate. Next slide, please. So a little bit more detail on how we're thinking about the incentive program. So we've broken into upfront incentives and then ongoing incentives. The upfront incentives would be coming from the budget surplus, and would be paid out kind of on the size of the storage system. And we're looking at a 50% kind of allocation, 50% of those funds, so $20 million towards low income residential customers and resilience hubs, another 50% for market rate residential, non-residential, with again higher incentive levels for low income and resilience hubs. And we'd be looking to adjust that as needed. If the burn is really fast, if there's a lot of demand for that, then we would lower it and make the money go further. If we're not seeing funds being allocated because there's not sufficient demand, then we would look to increase that rate so that we could make sure to get this money out to the community. And then there's the ongoing incentive piece. So as noted, we want to make sure that these systems are connected to our distributed energy resource management system. There's an ongoing joke in staff that nobody hears that or sees that, understands what it means, so we're gonna figure out how to rename that. But we want, that presents a point of connectivity for that battery and some ability to control it. So not only is it providing resilience, providing some energy arbitrage for customers, but increasingly as we pursue 100% renewable energy and also kind of hourly load following, we need to think about these resources and how we can access those resources for kind of AVA-wide grid management, energy procurement hedging. And then the ongoing incentives will be paid monthly over 5 years. So that's how we can kind of make sure that these systems continue to operate as we expect them to, and they need to. And if customers are, say, taking a battery and just keeping it entirely for their own usage, for example, and it's not, dispatching into the grid, then we have a mechanism to encourage them to kind of participate in the program again. So that's how we plan to do that. Next slide, please. So lastly, got some ongoing feedback. So we'd love to get your feedback on how we're planning to use the surplus funding. We're getting some more community feedback going into this March Community Advisory Committee meeting and continue to follow up with the solar industry. We are now bringing on, through a solicitation that we issued a couple of months ago, a DERMS provider that is online to help us kind of run this program and bring it to market. So they'll be taking on some of the administrative activities associated with the program. And then we're interviewing a new staff person. So running a $40+ million program is not something you do without additional personnel. So as soon as we kind of got the direction from you all around the use of those funds, we created use one of our local development positions and are bringing on somebody to help manage that. And then from a board perspective, we do have our NEM2 solar billing policy that is going to be brought forth kind of in April. We wanted to bring these together because they're really kind of combined what we do transitioning from NEM 2.0 as well as the incentive program, or we see it's kind of hand to hand. So we'll bring the action item to you all, or to the board, in April around the NEM 2 solar billing plan, successor tariff, the solar and storage incentive program with more details on how we plan to launch that, as well as we expect to bring an action item on the DERMS provider, which we see is necessary to kind of bring this whole thing together and leveraging the flexibility that behind the meter batteries are increasingly giving us as we look to that resource. So that was what we have today. And
Thank you very much. Any questions from the board?
Yes, thank you. The $300,000 grant, how many of those do you envision awarding?
So this right now, we would plan to issue it and have one.
Okay.
We do have additional funds in the community investment grant kind of bucket. And so as we've been getting proposals in for the different community investment grants that we've been issuing, we have taken a stance that if we have multiple proposals that don't conflict and really provide value, we could have some flexibility on potentially awarding multiple, but right now the plan is for one.
For one, okay. And then the date at the bottom, that's this March? Is the
Correct.
proposed, okay. And help me understand the rationale in the 50% split for low income and the market.
Yeah, it was just an even split between kind of the low income and resilience hub customers, as well as the need and the call out from continuing to have behind the meter solar deployment across the territory and the transition from NEM 2.0 to solar billing plans. So we've equally heard kind of from the solar industry and the community that they want support for solar. We want to make sure that support is contingent on storage as well, as it increases kind of the flexibility element. So the 50-50 split was one cut, and how we allocate that to those different customer segments.
And then how are we going to ensure geographic equity on this?
Yeah, so we have not, I looked at how we would kind of split that by state, or sorry, by city. Right now it would be a budget allocation for each of those, and that would create a requirement that 20 million gets spent for low income. If more applications come in for low income, then you could, eat into the market rate budget, so that kind of budget allocation wall goes one way, right? And would have a higher incentive for the low income and resilience hubs. But so far have not considered having a city by city kind of allocation based on population. Administratively, that becomes pretty challenging.
Yeah, mine is, we've obviously heard a lot of public comment related to kind of, I'll call it micro grants or micro incentives, right? So maybe you can help me understand, what's the lowest level that we're looking at granting or doing? The 300, and so it's $300,000 chunks? Am I misunderstanding or?
For the community innovation grants?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was kind of the feedback and direction we got from the board when we put together the community investment grant was, larger grants that are multiple years that provide kind of more stability and the ability for CBOs to like build capacity and do new work. Some of the feedback we got from our first community innovation grants that we did, which were smaller, the $40,000, was you're kind of piling on work and you're not necessarily able to build capacity. So it's a bit of a push and pull on small and larger. We also have kind of bandwidth constraints around administering lots of small grants, and so kind of the larger grants is what we've set up to manage.
Yeah, and partnering with solar installers and in the industry is what the intent is to do, right? That we would partner with them to get them, that they're aware of the grants and that they could, inform their customer, right?
Correct. And the incentives are small. They would be like potentially like $1,000 for a residential system upfront plus an ongoing stream of, call it $20 a month or something like that. So though the actual incentives are tailored to be, for individual residential customers up to, community resilience hubs. So those are quite flexible. I think the CBO kind of community investment grant is the $300,000 grant, and that we want a kind of a partner to work with for a few years who is out in the community building kind of capability to identify resilience hubs, providing feedback on the technical assistance that we're providing, so that if we need to change the scope of those services based on the needs that are kind of coming out from these resilience hub opportunities, then we're able to do that. So that's also why it's helpful to have some continuity in the community-based organizations that we're working with.
I would just say, to your point, we would be looking to create awareness and education with contractors so that they can then incorporate this into their sales to customers. And in that way, we could address some of the geographic distribution, making sure that we're doing outreach to contractors throughout the service territory.
Yeah, I'll give a comment, which is, as soon as we partner with anyone, I think we've talked about this in the past, as soon as we partner with them, who we partner with matters for our reputation and trustworthiness just as much, right? And with NEM 3.0 coming online, at least in Pleasanton, I've been hearing a lot of, I'll call it, confusion, misinformation. Is it even worth doing solar anymore, right? And I said, no, Ava's working on a couple of programs, so you're in the Ava community territory, right? But I think that will be an informational challenge that I think we should worry about without trying to be better. Question wise, what do you see as the barriers that we frequently encounter to actually getting these on the ground, right? Like, what is when you guys, because you guys are clearly closer to it, know it, we're trying to deploy these dollars and obviously build resiliency, right? So what are the common barriers you see, and maybe a little bit of, do you think this program and how we've laid it out or you presented will overcome some of those?
Yeah,
maybe not all of them.
So I would, I'll take that in the context of a couple of different market segments. So if we're thinking about the market segment of like market rate, individual residential customers contemplating going solar, there's a very distributed market of solar installers. And so getting out and having consistent kind of messaging and training around the incentives and how they work. You know, we're not planning to say, approve of these 10 solar contractors and not those. Would be a incentive program, much like PG&E or others, state agencies have run, where you say there's a approved list of equipment and the kind of warranty terms associated with that. And then if you bring that equipment to us and get it permitted, then it gets an incentive. So, but there is quite a lot of training through that channel, and that's a long tail channel. It's one of the reasons why we're, working with CALSA and other local installers that we know, to kind of vet this program and think through how best to roll it out. One of the kind of most important elements of that channel is actually kind of the equipment manufacturers. So the solar installers are actually very widely distributed, but there's a few solar inverters that actually manage batteries. So SolarEdge, Enphase, Tesla, LG, right? Like there's a smaller number of those. So, and they often are providing training to their installers. So that's another way, that we're looking to partner with the DERMS provider who has those relationships already, because they've already built the APIs to kind of connect it to those batteries. So that training and consistency is important. And similar to what you've heard on the grapevine around, messaging around solar, we still hear solar installers saying, well, you shouldn't go with Ava, right? You should go with PG&E, or like that kind of missing erroneous messaging. So I think the provision of a incentive program that we can go out and lead with is going to help us, because people follow the money. The second is on resilience hubs. They are more complicated, and they're definitely more complicated when it's a community-based organization or a smaller community who wants to identify an opportunity for a resilience hub but doesn't necessarily know where to go or have a site. And so that's why kind of the demand generation and the training in the community around how we can identify what is a good site and what's a process for bringing that to a point where we can actually install a solar and battery powered system for resilience. It's potentially long lead time. So one of the things that we've issued out in our survey is, do people in the community know of potential sites, and what do those sites look like? And how do we bring that forward so that it doesn't end up being a very attenuated process to actually bring sites forward?
Can I ask on that, maybe more for clarification, make sure I'm on the same page? Let's say we've got, and we've talked about it, let's just say we've got a community medical center, right? It has no solar now and it wants to become a resiliency hub, right? The way I'm understanding what you've presented is, unless they kind of their total bailiwick is $300,000, right? We're gonna pass on them because we're looking for at least that price point or that quantity. Is that correct?
Yeah, so not quite. So
Okay.
the $300,000 grant is for kind of one community-based organization to help with demand generation and training across the service territory. So they may be helping, that medical center, like identify what are the use case, what does the community center want to do, and identifying that, hey, we have this technical assistance program. If the community center facilities manager wants to understand what, is a good, solar and battery system for resilience, then, that technical assistance is made available to them. And then they would put together a proposal and say, okay, we want 40 kilowatt PV system and 20 kilowatt hour battery. How do we get that to market? Again, technical assistance comes in and says, okay, this is how you go get bids, and we'll help you review those bids. And so and then they can go get an incentive, kind of what, if that incentive is a $50,000 incentive or a $150,000 incentive, then they can apply to our program and get those funds. So the community investment grant is not like for one particular site. It's really kind of facilitating that community engagement around around our territory. And it's not every resilience hub needs to come through that, right? Like that's something that we'll be working with to help create demand generation. But if the medical center is on top of its game and knows what it's want, it could just go straight to the incentive, right? It doesn't have to go through each of those steps. Those aren't those aren't stage gates that you have to go through. Those are kind of resources we're making available.
Let me elaborate too. Part of the issue is that I think resilience hubs, there's some significant challenges we see in actually executing and delivering resilience hubs. And so the community grant is really to help us define scope. How do you go execute on a resilience hub? And what does that really mean? How do you define that? There's a lot of different types of services that may be associated with a resilience hub that really fall outside of the energy provider scope. To provide these services on an ongoing basis, or perhaps in response to specific, energy related events where people need these services. And so there's a lot of sort of real research and diligence that we want to do with a established community-based organization to help us evaluate various communities and understand what are the needs of that community as it relates to resilience hub. Because we've heard feedback consistently of we need to go and invest in resilience hubs for the benefit of our community. And we support that, but how you actually do that, I think it has a pretty wide scope of what you need to do. And then specifically as it relates to the energy portion of that, how do we actually facilitate that? Obviously, that's our expertise. We do want to make sure that we're properly focused on the energy aspects, but there's a lot of other services that are outside of the energy realm that various organizations may want to provide. And so I think there's some research to be done there over a longer period of time to really understand what are the needs of the community, and what are other organizations that will provide these other services in a position to actually do. So if we can help facilitate the energy aspects of it, what do they layer on top of that to ensure that there actually are good public services that are being provided, as opposed to we go install an expensive solar and storage system and the other services actually aren't there on top of it, then what is it what is it actually doing as in terms of public good and service? So that's part of what the community grant has really helped evaluate, is to work through that and understand what the community wants, in addition to making sure to solve some of these challenges that we see, which is sort of the landlord tenant issue. Do they own the space or not? And how do we kind of work through that? And we think one of the reasons why it's a multi-year grant is we think it will take some time for some of these other community-based organizations that may want to actually apply for an incentive and provide these services, or whether it's a hospital that wants to do that. They're gonna need to work through that. I don't think they're in a position today to say, we are ready to provide sort of a broader scope of services as it relates to resiliency hub. They'll probably need some time to say, okay, well, let's work from an energy, with an energy expert to understand how we get the energy needs backed up. But then we have to really scope the other services that we need to go do. And that's probably a multi-year effort to do that.
Not so much a question, but maybe a comment to this is, so Pleasanton has a organization called Go Green Initiative, and it's high schoolers that get grants from Stop Waste particularly, and they're micro grants. I'm gonna call it 5-10 grand. And what they've got is they've got enough professional staff that then harness the power of the youth to go do something, right? And so they investigated the energy usage at our schools and figured out how wasteful we are at that, and how wasteful we are at sorting different sorting the different elements, trash and recycling. And I'm thinking, to me, like, they're also rolling out community farms so that we can distribute mulch. I mean, we are doing these things in our community, but I feel like there's an expectation miss, or maybe a communication miss, not intentional, but just, I think we also need to be starting to look at the language we're using for what resiliency means, because at least in Pleasanton, we have so many power outages and people simply just want to go to a spot to charge something, right? It might be that power bank that they've already got, right? That resiliency hub is a lot different than a $300,000 grant to go figure out how to do it at some, medical billing, right? And I don't know if we've aligned yet on that language and that concept, but it feels like we're off a little bit. Not to say any of these shouldn't be going forward, right?
But I think the grant that we're identifying is to try to differentiate what you're speaking to is what are those needs and the different types of facilities that can offer different types of services. Whether it's this is a facility that will be used a few times a year because there are significant power outages that people want to go charge at, or are there other services that are being provided, food, clothing, shelter, medical assistance, things like that would certainly be a broader scope, and many of those things are not energy related. And there are other providers that would need to facilitate that and have a site for that, and we can, we can address the energy needs there. And I think the intent of the $300,000 grant is to define those needs within the community. And for Pleasanton, you may be aware of some of that need and where that should be focused in different cities that may look a little differently. That's what we want to make sure that we're properly defining and understanding the scope and the types of resiliency hubs that are out there.
Yeah, I see, so one thing that I'm seeing in this resilience hub space right now are kind of these concepts of a toolkit, like a resilience hub toolkit for CBOs in our territory and elsewhere who have done it. PSE Energy has also kind of done like a resilience hub mapping tool, which identifies schools and community centers and other things that could be resilience hubs, churches for different kind of use cases. So there's this increasing set of toolkits out there. So I would, one role of the community-based organization is like, going to a medical center, the high school, and kind of saying, here's the toolkit, right? Like, who's the decision maker? Do you own your building or is it owned by somebody else? Do you have roof or parking? Like, what are these different technical and community constraints and decisioning processes that you would need to go through to then say, okay, we have buy-in, now we're gonna go and apply for the incentive. And so that kind of community grant could then be spread to lots of different agencies, sites, community groups. That's kind of the demand generation piece, right? Like, you have to have some buy-in of what is the resilience hub, what do we want to do with it, what purposes does it serve, and what are our resources? So you need to kind of like bundle that up before somebody can actually say, okay, I want one of these things and I'm ready to go do it. And so that's kind of the demand generation part that is really distributed to people who are like, I'm interested, I have this, this, and this, and I know what I want, and these are the three things that I need some help with, right? So I think that toolkit kind of methodology is one way to think about how the community grant can be used through the demand generation part of the work.
And I would just layer in, when you look back at that slide of there's the community grant, the technical assistance, and the incentive program. Community grant, in my mind, is really to scope the need, really understand what the community wants and help define that. And then the technical assistance, which is $2 million and also a long-term, is, okay, now that we understand the need, how do we work with the right organizations and actually do the technical work? Because it is a long process to go properly site and do the diligence and the interconnection aspects and the design aspects and understand who's really appropriate to sort of house a resilience program of some sort. And that third portion is the incentive program itself, which has the biggest dollars. And that is not just Resilience Hub. That is to address some of the, the changes from NEM 2.0 to 3.0, but it is also specifically carved out to make sure that we have some money set aside really for Resilience Hubs to support that. So there's kind of that three-tier approach or three-pillar approach, if you will.
So I would like to make some comments here. I think it's all great. We have this funds, we have ideas about how to improve the situations in the communities. And I just bring a little bit my my experience. I used to work with PG&E back like 10, 15 years ago. We were doing large energy efficiency and the solar programs. One thing I want to bring to here is it will take a lot of more thinking and management for managing such a grant. So I remember last time, like that's back 15 years ago, the energy efficiency budget was like $100 million. I kind of forgot, like $100 million or something. So it's a good amount of size. So what I'm trying to say is we probably need more discussions on exactly how we manage this program and how we start this program. I know we already put a lot of thoughts there, but just look at the discussion we had today. I feel like we probably need to discuss this again in the future meetings. And also I just feel like we need more program managers in place in the future to manage those programs as well. Normally, depends on the size of the budget, like 10% to different percentage budget will goes to the management for the employees, just in-house, who will keep the policies and have those criteria and choose different programs where to put the budget and administer those programs, and also need to review, make sure those programs are going well. If there's things not going well, they have to correct that. So there's a whole program management side there. Just want to bring a a few of my experience and comments here.
Yeah, thank you very much. That's why we're hiring a new staff person to run this, as well as, contracting with an external counterparty who can run some of those program management and administrative tasks, because it is a sizable effort to do this correctly. And yeah, that may end up growing over time. We'll see, but that's the start, at least, to get it running. And we certainly do plan to bring this back with more definition to the April board meeting, for you all to consider.
Any other questions from the board? We veered from discussion a little bit. That's okay. Any public comment on this item?
Yes, we have one hand raised for public comment. Bradley Cleveland, we have two hands raised for public comment. Bradley Cleveland, you're recognized for 3 minutes.
Hi, appreciate it. My name is Bradley Cleveland. I'm an Oakland resident, and I'm a consultant with IBEW Local 595. I appreciate the clarification from staff on the 3 elements of this program. And I want to speak to the third element, the solar plus storage incentive. There's a significant opportunity that wasn't available to AVA back when the Critical Municipal Facilities Program was developed. And that is the federal direct pay program. And I hope that you'll take that into consideration as you look at this program. And as you may know, the direct pay allows tax-exempt agencies, nonprofits, churches, even AVA Energy itself, to receive tax credits for various green energy projects. Previously, because you don't pay taxes, you couldn't get a tax credit. That has now changed. So because of this change, I'd like to argue for more funding to be allocated to the hubs rather than a 50-50 split, primarily because if you put up $20 million or $30 million, you could actually draw down an additional 50 to 70% of the cost of these facilities through a tax credit. So if a resiliency hub costs, let's say, a couple $1 million, you could let's say $2 million, you might be able to receive $1 million return on that investment. That's incredible. Could be up to 70% return on that initial investment. That almost creates a revolving loan fund that you create with this additional money coming through the direct pay program. You can actually build additional hubs. And second, a resiliency hub, and by definition, community resiliency hub, provides a community benefit, a larger benefit that could be used by churches, by community centers, senior centers. So for that reason, I really appreciate this program, but would argue for that rethinking how the money is split. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Local Clean Energy Alliance, you're recognized for 3 minutes.
Hi, everyone. Jessica Tovar, Local Clean Energy Alliance and the East Bay Clean Power Alliance. I kind of want to echo what Bradley said. I really do think that there needs to be a shift in how much funds are used to start this program. And just recognizing back in 2022, I think it was 1.4 million for the next 3 years was allocated, and then another 1.4 in 2023. There's plenty of money to start off this program than just 100,000 for the first year. And really centralizing this to just one organization. I really want to ask that you really think about how, large the territory is, and the fact that we do need to reach all the communities and meet different organizations and community groups where they're at, versus putting all your incentive money into, like, when you get solar X amount of years from now, then you're going to be able to reap this local generation of wealth. So I do think that there needs to be a lot more money put into the grants. There should be multiple grants, actually. There should be more encouragement of collaboration of organizations. And then going back to meeting where folks are at, there are folks who just need money to do the planning and the organizing, and are not exactly there yet in terms of having a site, for example, or having you know, a site with a rooftop that's ready for the energy piece, which is really important, really a struggle, and really something we've been asking for, you know, as far back as, you know, 2020. And so I just want to kind of emphasize that I think some of that money from the 50-50 split needs to be used on the onset of this program, and the same going back to the Community Innovation Grant Fund. It has multiple millions of dollars that are sitting there since 2022 that have not been allocated. And I do think the Resilience Hub program is a critical need. So I just wanted to emphasize that. I do want to use some of my time to just acknowledge, thank you so much for you know, really responding to this need in the community. Both the board members, but also to JP and his staff and the local development team who have been reaching out to us and other organizations. I think there's a lot of room here to make this an even more stronger program and also a more collaborative process. And we are ready to continue doing that with you. Thank you very much. Clean power to the people.
Thank you. There are no further hands raised for public comment.
Thank you. Bring it back for board discussion. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I can start. I'll frame it in, I think it's an exciting thing that we're kind of trying to do something different and get it going, right? And so keeping in context that mindset of, you know, good work. I think the challenges are going to be strong and significant, and we don't even know all of them, right? So I'm not sure about the split. I think staff can come back when they bring the final recommendation and evaluate the comments given. I don't have a basis to say it should be more or less, but I do think that the split should be what staff believes will generate the best impact, right? So, you know, how do we properly fund a program so it's successful, right? How do we evaluate a program to say maybe we should redeploy the dollars to a more effective program, and so come up with a split and the logic and basis for why, so that we can trust you to, you know, do the best you can to make it a success. And I think, you know, just be very careful who we partner with, because I think our reputation as AVA is growing in a positive light, and I would like it to maintain on that, right? And so if we have solar installers or others that might be not fully informed or aware of what we're offering, I think that could thwart our efforts just as much as we try to put roots down on this. My other comment is, as I think about what we've done here, we've had a bit more time thanks to the chair's prerogative. But I think I'll just mention we have a lot of new board members at the AVA level. So making sure we're talking about what each of these are in a bit of granularity or a bit of background. It took me a minute myself just to remember that. And I think that might help the discussion a bit further. It's a little more difficult, I think, contextually or conceptually. And so I think new board members would benefit from that. I think old board members would benefit from the reminder of what it means. And I think you saw, I will say, it took me a minute to remember it. So that board education, so that we are fully aware of what we're doing and what your intentions are, right? So the $300,000 program, like we talked about in more detail. So yeah, so I guess I'll say, you know, allocation based on what you think is the most effective and creates the strongest roots, how you're going to evaluate if we should redeploy dollars, because no one ever wants to stop a program once it ever starts, because they think it just needs another year of funding, right? And they never die. But how do we get this going, right? And I appreciate the work you guys have done. So yeah.
I concur with a lot of those comments. I appreciate all of the background work to get us to this point. It was a bit confusing to track exactly what's occurring here, so I appreciate maybe starting more with the historical context and just offering each program on one slide, you know, maybe vet questions, move on to the next. I'm definitely open to the comments made by our two public commenters, so I don't know if staff has time to kind of revisit some of that commentary and propose options for our next meeting. I think this discussion's been going on for years, so I definitely want us to be mindful of that public input. And I don't have enough information about the federal funding and how we can leverage additional funding, so I'm curious to get more information on that as well.
Or at least find ways to support it if it is an option for our customers, right? So, you know, make sure we don't preclude them being able to have that option if, even if we're not gonna be advising and touching it directly, right?
And I think it's an aggressive timeline.
Right.
We're adding a little bit more complexity to it, so I would hope that the public would understand we're trying to get this right. So I'm open to, if we have to push it out a bit, just to further engage folks in the discussion to provide a more comprehensive approach. I support that.
Over Hugh, any comments?
No, thank you.
I'll say I agree with what the other two members have said. I think this is a really good program. It's, you know, like I said, it takes a second to wrap around exactly what we're talking about when we talk about the sort of three phases of it, of the community grant to help people figure it out, then the technical assistance, then the incentives. But I think that the headline to a certain extent should be, this is a really big investment in something that we've been asked to do for a long time, of really invest in resilient hubs and in the community. And this is us figuring out how to do that in the best way possible. I'm also always happy to see us, you know, expanding our capacity of hiring people to manage such programs. I know that, you know, when we pushed on that on the board in the past, we've heard, you know, we need more people in order to have more programs. So I'm happy to see us have more people to do that. I think it will behoove us a lot when we start implementing this, is maybe thinking a bit farther down the line, to really have report backs to the board about how many of those incentives we're giving out, what the size of those are, what sort of organizations those are too, because that will really answer, I think, the through line we've heard in public comment for a couple of years of people want it to be to, you know, smaller organizations, to building that capacity there in a lot of different places throughout our service area. And, you know, I know on the face of it, that community grant 300K part can look like we're just giving it to one big organization, when in reality, when everything shakes out, I think, as staff has explained, we'll hopefully be giving out to a lot more organizations, and that 300K will just be helping us get that started. So I want to emphasize that I think it'll be useful to have that really come back and show how much we are really distributing a lot of these funds in the incentive part of things.
Can I add one comment?
Mhm.
I just want to address a point that Director Balch made earlier about, you know, what are the challenges in terms of implementation, addressing some of the solar and storage related needs, and just make a point and maybe make a clarification point as well. You know, the shift from NEM 2.0 to NEM 3.0 will have a significant impact on the installation market. Residential and commercial customers, the economics of them installing these systems is significantly reduced. And I think the incentive program that we're proposing here is intended to offset some of that and encourage customers to install storage, which historically has been just economically challenging. So we're in a period of transition of where batteries can become more cost effective, and really pushing the market, the customers, to want to do that. And so we've had a lot of conversation around how do you structure that incentive program to be effective, because to your point, it is, you want to work with the right installers to advise on that. We're not doing that direct advisory work with the customers, although obviously we will layer on education. But at the end of the day, the installers are really driving that sort of business development, finding the customers, obviously doing that technical diligence work. And so it's a very challenging aspect to design this incentive program effectively to make sure we provide a good customer experience, but also improve reliability and resilience to the grid, where we can actually utilize those batteries in various ways. So there's been a lot of analysis, but also conjecture and discussion as to how do you do that without hurting the customer experience while also having some control of those batteries. How do you price those effectively and address the NEM 2.0 3.0 shift? That's a lofty ask, and I think to Director Marcose's point, it may take some time. I think we want to propose something quick because we're making that transition regardless. And so we want to have an incentive program there to help facilitate and not hurt the market going from NEM 2.0 to 3.0. So we want to move quickly. We also want to get it right. So I think we'll be quick to make some proposals, but we'll want to have some flexibility to come back to the board, say, there's $40 million we want to put towards incentive program. Some portion of that will be for resilience hubs. And there will also be some portion specifically to care and fair customers versus, non-care and fair customers. And we'll probably want some ability to adjust that in the coming years, because it will take some time to really understand how to do this properly and not hurt the customer experience, and make sure you have a consistent message to drive more installations, make people understand the storage component is really important. And this is how the incentive program actually improves the value of these systems and facilitates more installations.
My apologies. I just want to point out that that member Hugh dropped from the call, and as such, we've lost our quorum.
No, we haven't.
Three?
Oh, three. Oh, wait. Yes, sorry, my apologies.
Good.
I saw that as well, if I may, through the chair. So, the challenge that I think is resiliency, right? Resiliency in terms of grid reliability is what I translated to. And I think we talked about when we talked about the adders, right? So I'm trying to make sure Ava's thinking about how to get it where people do solar with the battery storage rather than going and buying the generator at Costco and getting it installed, right? That runs on natural gas through their system. And Pleasanton, they're going up left and right? So I do see this as part of our Climate Action 2.0. Grid reliability or resiliency, though, does come down to the physical connection problem that we're having, which we're experiencing with trees going down in these, monster storms, that I don't think Ava's gonna be able to, that's not us, right? That's not us. And then obviously the brownouts that we used to experience years ago actually hasn't been, so significant in frequency, with the way we've been doing it. So I think that's what I was saying, where I thought that we might have a miss on where we're talking in expectations, because I think that people are looking for resiliency so that when physical breaks occur in the distribution network to their home, there's a place still to do work or go to do work and, get power. And then on a micro level, that their food is still in the freezer and frozen, right? So, yeah, I think there's a lot of challenges with it, but I think, you've got to be flexible so you can evaluate it. And so I think that's where the performance metrics of how you're just deploying it will be helpful for the future.
And I do want to make sure to point out the solar and storage incentive program that we're talking about, $40 million that's sort of been allocated towards that right now, is both a resilience hub matter, but is also separate and distinct from that, which is a shift from NEM 2.0 to 3.0.
Yeah.
So it is kind of pulling that all into one, and that's one of the reasons why I want to highlight the need for flexibility to make sure we're addressing the various subcomponents effectively, but also understanding it's not just resilience. I mean, obviously, when you install solar storage, there's a resilience component, of course, but the public resilience hubs in that are somewhat distinct as well.
We're gonna learn a lot as we go.
Yeah.
So we'll need to be looking back at that and making adjustments.
But I think that's where you've got to get, make sure we get the board on level set so that when you start the conversation, because there's a lot of elements here that you've presented in the past that are now all coming together as I see it. And, yeah, we don't want them to take a heartbeat minute at the main meeting, right? We want to figure it out. So we bring them all up to speed and knowledge level at the same time. So yeah, a bit of background on this would be helpful.
Any further discussion? Seeing none. Hopefully that's everything staff needs. With that, we will move to item 8, which is committee member and staff announcements, including requests for future executive committee agenda items. Any items from members of the board?
I just have an informational request, or maybe, which is a budget timeline. I've asked about this, so when are we gonna start our budget process and timeline as Ava, so that we can have the conversations about all of these allocations that might be a bit more, so, if staff can let us know that. It doesn't have to be today, or maybe it can even be a memo. I did put on, and I'll mention, I think that as Ava looks to standardize, it should start to evaluate its governance structure. Do we have the right setups for Ava from a startup organization? As a board, maybe I say, because we have our standing committees, you know, and it's probably not a great time while we're going out for an executive director element, but we probably should evaluate if we're set up the right way for how we do business, right? Because I think there's a lot going on. And how staff allocates, I realize we're on the executive committee, but you know, how staff brings things to different subcommittees of the board. And should that be just checked as we move into phase 2.0 ourselves? So I'll just say those, I don't think they're to bring back maybe right now, but just on my watch list. I don't know if anyone agrees or not, but.
Can I just comment on the budget question, just so you're aware, we are bringing forward a schedule specifically to the FAP subcommittee next week.
Okay.
And happy to, of course, I mean, those are public, but happy to send those over for review. What is intended there is to bring forward initial draft budget to exec com in the first May meeting. And then FAP following that, and then the full board in May, and then of course in June for what would be intended to be final.
Okay, can I also ask for an updated roster since we do have some new
Yeah.
members? And maybe just listing which members sit on specific committees, just so we have that same knowledge. Thank you.
And then do we have, maybe I should ask the main board, does the board allow members to alternate or choose to be on different subcommittees? And should we ask the main board for that? We can talk offline about that, so. Okay. Great.
Any further? Any public comment on this item?
There are no hands raised at this time.
Great. With that, we will move to adjournment. Thank you, other board members, and all of our staff for being here. We are adjourned.
Thank you.
Nice job.
Thank you.
Congratulations.